Winner take all is responsible for all the things you hate about politics. Let me explain why. If you've ever seen a county-by-county map of a recent election, it shows a sea of red for Republicans, with only little dots of blue representing Democratic wins. The thinking goes that rural voters only vote Republican, and urban voters vote Democrat. And even though a lot more people live in urban areas than rural, it's a big country, so that's just like geography, baby. But why exactly do we select our representatives purely by geography anyway? Do I really have that much in common with the people who happen to live in my neighborhood and county? This distortion is mostly a function of how we determine who wins and who loses at election time. In this country, we have what's called a first-past-the-post or winner-take-all system. That means that whoever gets the most votes wins, as it should be, right? If a candidate takes 50.01% of the vote, even if it's a squeaker won by just a handful of votes, they get the seat. This is seen as proof that every vote counts. Even though 49.99% of voters might hate the winning candidate's guts, them's just the breaks. You win some, you lose some. But is this really the best way of doing things? If you're a conservative Republican, and you live in my hometown, the deep blue city of Chicago, your preferred candidates will always lose. Same if you happen to be a progressive Democrat living in blood red Kansas. If you don't live in the same geographic region as the rest of the people who think like you, then your vote doesn't count. Some might even say if you're one of these people, sometimes called orphan voters, you don't get represented at all. You chose the wrong place to live, and you're just out of luck. The zero-sum nature of winner-take-all is responsible for all the things you hate most about politics. Well, maybe not all, but we can list quite a few without straining ourselves. Zero-sum is black and white. There can only be one winner. Therefore, if I win, you lose. No gray area, no middle ground. This is one of the reasons why American election campaigns are so relentlessly negative and content-free. The phenomenon of negative campaigning combined with safe seats intensifies polarization within government, creating a constant state of gridlock. In his excellent book, Fixing Elections, Stephen Hill outlines all the ways that winner-take-all perverts our democratic system. Winner-take-all affects who gets the most campaign cash. Winner-take-all has a negative impact on voters who are perceived as supporting the other team. Winner-take-all is a force that encourages the major parties to put their own partisan interests ahead of the national interest. Finally, winner-take-all deprives voters of choices and creates the lesser of two evils scenario that prevents any third-party interlopers from challenging the Democrats and Republicans. One of the reasons gerrymandering works is it helps convince the people who might vote for your opponent not to show up. If your congressional district always swings 60-40, landslide victory territory, it is logical to stop voting at some point. How many times do you have to see that your vote doesn't really matter before you get the message? Don't bother. If we look at the 2012 election, out of 435 seats, only 62, less than 15%, were won with less than 10 percentage points. That means that 85% of House races in 2012 were not competitive. When you have a situation like this, there are fewer and fewer reasons for, say, a Republican candidate to appeal to moderates, or independents, or, heaven forbid, Democrats. It's winner-take-all that makes the competition so fierce in those few remaining districts that are up for grabs. There can only be one winner, so the logic is simple in a two-party race. If you lose, I win. The last man standing takes the prize. As Stephen Hill described, if support for your opponent declines, your chances rise, a kind of teeter-totter effect, because voters don't have anywhere else to go. Therefore, it's not really necessary for me to convince you to support me. Instead, all I really have to do is scare you away from my opponent. This is why campaigns are so negative and nasty. You don't have to like me at all. You don't need to agree with my policies. All I have to do is smear my opponent badly enough that you refuse to give him your vote. The best strategy is to go negative, sling that mud, and convince the swing voters not to vote for the other guy. It's even better if you can charge up your base at the same time. If the whole point is to tear down your opponent, policy never really enters into the mix at all. Nasty campaigns help drive the major parties further apart. Because modern elections tend to go right for the gutter, it becomes much harder for the opposing side to come together after the elections to negotiate new laws in the public interest. Increasingly, partisan warfare resembles trench warfare. These days, party positions are driven not by political philosophy or ideology, but by taking the opposing side of whatever the other party wants. What Stephen Hill calls pointlessly adversarial politics. For example, when Democratic President Barack Obama designed a health care law based off of what the Conservative Heritage Foundation had proposed, a plan implemented by Republican Governor Mitt Romney in Massachusetts, basically stealing the Republican Party's alternative to a public health care option, the GOP suddenly decided there was nothing they could possibly hate more. Some minor details aside, the Republicans took the contrary position on their own health care proposals because the Democrats were suddenly supporting them. This illustrates how winner-take-all helps polarize government. Anything that can possibly be seen as a victory for one side is a loss for the other side and cannot be tolerated. But the American public really is the biggest loser in this competition. There's no reason to help the public if helping them helps your political enemies. A very depressing thought to end on. So I won't. Instead, I will say that just because it makes no sense for our constitutionally bound representatives to actually govern in the public interest doesn't mean that we have to play along. We don't need them. And if we don't support them, we need to build something we can support and that we do support. It needs to be a mass organization of people who are deciding what policies they do want and implementing them and reforming our government into a shape that serves the needs of the many, not just the few. It won't be easy, but there's nothing that is more worth doing. I hope that you will open your heart to the possibility. In the meantime, please like, follow, favorite, and sign up for my free Substack. Let's make them pay, brothers and sisters. That's just like geography, baby.